Hello, so this is going to be a tutorial on how to make UI plugins in RetroSketch. So here's an example of what we're going to be working with. You can see that it has faded out the background. If I click on that, it'll hide it. We have a from hex and a to hex and a couple of buttons and another button down here to do the recoloring. And this is a persistent UI, so it's long-lived. If I type in a number there and then come back, it's still going to be there. So this is a tool that exists for a long period of time. So if we go and open it, I'll show you what it does. It essentially takes one color and converts it to another color. So if I drew some black squares here, and just to show that it doesn't affect those, I'll do that one. I'll go back to the color black as my selected, and rather than typing in the hex code for the black, I'm just going to say use, and it's going to pick my current color. And then I'm going to say turn it to green. So let's go back to the plugin. We're going to say go to that and then recolor. And you'll see all the black squares now turn green. That's basically all this does. But this is a good example of how to make a somewhat complex UI that has a bunch of different kinds of interactions. And yeah, let's get started. I think the easiest way for us to work with this is if we're working directly in the plugins directory. That way every time we save, we can just reopen the window. So I'm going to go to View, Artist Plugins, and you'll see that we have our plugins here. I'm actually going to add in the API files as well. So I'm going to go to View, Engine Plugins, and you'll see we have these two API files, so I'm going to just copy those and paste them in here so that I have them in here. And next I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code to this folder. Okay, so I have it open here, and we're just going to create another one called Recolor, but this will be our own, recolor.lua. This will be our copy of how it operates. So the first thing that you recall is there's a big background, is this kind of grayish background that covers the whole screen, and if we click on it, it causes the UI to close. So the way that we deal with this is that we create a special interface specification, and this is just a string that we pass in to the engine to generate the UI for us. And first off, there's going to be quite a few things here that may not make any sense or may seem like magic. I'm pulling them out of nowhere. But we have documentation on the website for all of these fields and values and what you can put in them. So the string specification is very much like INI, and the UI starts under the UI section. So we create a base UI, and then underneath that we make a UI slash background. The slash is super important because it tells us this is the parent, so UI is the parent and this is the child. So UI slash background is automatically a child of this UI, and that's how we start all of our UI, is making it a child of the UI branch. So I'm going to make a panel that spans the entire screen and is semi-transparent black. So the type here is going to be equal to a panel. The anchor is going to be a stretch center, and the stretch is going to be, so this is a vector 4 of, we have left, top, right, bottom, and those are numbers to squeeze in this around the edges, but we're not squeezing it in anywhere. We want it to be flush with the sides of the screen, and so that's just a feature of the anchor type stretch center. It just stretches the whole screen. And then we're going to set our color equal to color, and it's going to be black with a It's gonna be black with a semi-transparent background here. And then we lastly want to set it in front of everything in RetroSketch. So we want to say layout z equals 30. You can choose other numbers here. You can make it higher or lower. This essentially is just the depth that it is on the screen. If it's too far back, then things will go in front of it. In fact, we can see an example of that. If we'll leave it out for now and see what happens, just out of curiosity. So what we're going to do is we're going to load this UI, and then if we click it, we'll destroy it. So we'll start by saying eng, we'll make it a variable, local specs is equal to eng UI or load UI, and we pass in the global variable eng first, and then the specification, which is interface. And this is our UI layout. It just has a single panel stretching the whole screen, semi-transparent. And then we want to get this background so that we can put a click event on it. So I'll say local bg is equal to ng UI find, and we're going to find inside of specs. So this is our list of specifications that we've created. Inside of there, we are going to look for UI/background as a string, and this will give us our background back. So after that, we're going to want to put the click event on here. So we have a function called eng UI add event. We're going to pass in the engine, and then we're going to pass in the specified UI, which is going to be the BG. And then the type is the type of event, which we have access to in UI event type dot click. And lastly is going to be the function that's called when we click on this thing. I'm just going to inline it right in here. And what we're going to do is just destroy the UI. So eng UI destroy. Oh, sorry, it's not UI destroy. Okay, it's supposed to be eng UI destroy. I just fixed why that wasn't showing up. So eng and then the UI we want to destroy. We want to destroy all of our specifications that we generated. So we'll say specs there. So now we should have a window that pops up that we can click on, and it will destroy. So let's launch a new instance here. Okay, so now inside of the plugins we have our recolor, which is the one we're working on. If I select that, you'll see that all this UI here is in front of it. We have our background here, but all this UI is in front of it. Now let's test our click event. If I click, you'll see that it closed, but also you'll see that this dot is here, which is not what we want. We don't want anything to show up there when we click through. So there's two things we need to do here. One is we need to bring this background in front of everything, so layout z is equal to 30. That'll bring it in front of a bunch of all the stuff we see on screen. And then secondly, we need another argument to the load UI, and we need to give it the RetroSketch UI group. The UI group is responsible for how all UIs interact with each other, which ones are in front of each other, and it also interacts with the user interface of painting and all of that, so that it knows when it's blocked. So we want to say rs, and then you'll probably find group in here, so rs UI group, pass in the app, and now we save that, and we can go back to RetroSketch. Since we're destroying it, that means that every time we click this, we're going to create a new one. So now it's working properly where everything is behind it, except for maybe this text here, but that may be a bug and not a bug in the code we're writing. So now we can click and it's gone, and also we aren't painting on the screen anymore when we do that. So this gives us a nice way to test out our UI and make sure it's looking correct as we develop it out. We can just leave this open and just reopen the UI when we are ready to test. So the next thing we need is the main panel. There's a panel that is on top of this background that we need to add in. So UI/background/ I'll call it main. The type is a panel. The anchor is center. That's in the center of its parent. And see how we're doing UI background here. So this now knows this is a child of this guy because of how these slashes work. So this center is relative to its parent. Our width, we'll say about 200 pixels, and our height we'll say is 150 pixels. And then we want to set a color for it. So I'll say color equals color. We'll make it red just to make sure it's working. So 1001. Currently, at the time of this writing, these spaces here are required. It needs to be in this exact format, the number, comma, space, number, comma, space. I'll fix that later to be a little bit more relaxed, but just make sure that your spacing is correct here for now. So if we save this and we go back and we do plugins, recolor, we don't have it here. So let's see why. You remember what I said about this? I think I was clicking and dragging and I moved that comma when I was clicking and dragging and explaining. There we go. So now let's try that again. There's our red square. It's about the right size. And that is, we don't want it to be red. We want it to be kind of like a dark gray. And this is where we're going to add in a configuration field so that we don't have to copy and paste this color around throughout our user interface. So I'm going to create a config, and I'm going to create a BG color is equal to color 0.2, 0.2, 0.2, oops, and 1. And rather than typing the color here, I'll say I want the reference, the ampersand as a reference to config.bg color. And this is just the section value here and the field that we're wanting to copy into this location. So let's save this and let's reopen it. That's a better color there. So even though it's kind of close to the background, it'll make more sense once we put some stuff in it. So next, after we have our main panel, we probably want a title. So let's add in a title. And the title is going to be a child of this main panel. So this is where we're going to put all of our content. So I'm going to do, let's just copy this, paste it in here, /title. And we're going to say a type is a label. The anchor is equal to a stretch top. We're going to stretch across the top. The stretch is going to be equal to vec4. This is again left, top, right, bottom. So left, top, right. Now since this is a stretch top, the bottom value is the height. That's how tall it's going to be. So we'll say about 30 pixels. We want to justify the text equal to the center, and we want the baseline of the text to be center. So it's kind of centered right in the middle of the box that we've created here. This box here. It's 30 pixel high box and 200 width because it's a stretch top. So now we want a font size equal to 26. So it's a little large. Text is going to be equal to recolor. This autocomplete's driving me nuts. And then we can have a BG color. So this is the background color of the text, and it usually you can make your text transparent, but it's more performant for it to have a color. So in most cases, it's going to be on a flat background, and we can just use the color of its parent. So I'm going to put the color of its parent in there. And then the foreground color is going to be equal to a white. So let's take a look at that text, make sure it's in there right. Yep, there's our title there, recolor. Okay, so next we are going to have our two input boxes. And so we're still inside of the main panel. That's where we want to be. I'm just going to duplicate this line and bring it down here so I don't have to type it out. But instead of title, I'm going to make a new box, basically a new row. And I'll call it inputs. This is where our input boxes are going to be. And so this type is going to be a panel. And it's going to be anchor is just stretch top. So stretch top has a special feature where when they're stacked next to each other, so notice this is a stretch top and this is a stretch top, that means they're going to be stacked on top of each other. And so I don't have to set any kind of positioning or anything. I can just make it, in fact, the same stretch. I can just copy this down and make it the same stretch. And let's make sure it's working. So I'm going to say color is equal to, let's make it a red. I like to use red, it's very obvious. And let's make sure that this row is now showing up when we load it in. So there's our red box for our new row. So this top one is the row for the text. This one is the row for our inputs. Okay, so let's now remove the background. We don't need it. And we can reduce how many things we're drawing and have better performance if we don't have a background at all. Now this is the row we are putting our inputs inside of. So we're gonna I'm gonna duplicate this line and make this essentially a child. And so it's gonna be we're going to have a from input and a to input. So where are we coming from and where are we going to? Now these inputs are going to be the same size, the same type. They're going to have a different anchor, and they're going to have, I think those are the two main things. So what we want to do is actually create a template rather than copying and pasting, because we can fill out the from and we can paste it to to. But rather than doing that, we're going to create a template. So let's come up to the top and we're going to create templates, and we're going to make one called input. Templates / input. And its type is going to be input. Its x is going to be 5. Its width is going to be 75. Its height is going to be 30, which is the height of its parent. Okay, so we're going to copy this templates input here, go back down, and we're going to put exclamation point as in import templates input. And this essentially goes up here, copies all of this, and pastes it in place where this is at. So now all we have to do is override the fields that we're interested in. So we want to set the anchor to left, so this one's going to be on the left of the screen. And we want the placeholder text to be equal to from hex. And that's what's going to be showing up in the input box as like a ghost text that we see that gives us a hint of what this box is for. So now I can duplicate this, oops, and then change it to 2. I call this 2 hex. And instead of anchor left, I'm going to be anchor right, so it's going to be on the right side of this box. Now, the way that the layouts work is that they're now going to be clashing. There's something in this box and then you're trying to put something else somewhere else. So this right is not actually going to look correct. And we can take a look at that. So you see it's kind of like smashed together here. Now that's because we're putting multiple things in the row and it's trying to figure out what on earth you want. You want it on the right of this box and then move to the left. So we're going to specify exactly what we want. We want this to be a position is equal to absolute. So we're saying put this on the absolute right of this box. Don't worry about whatever else is in there. I want it on the far right. You shouldn't do any layout computations. So now when we do it, we're going to have it on the right hand side with a little 5 pixel offset. So now we have our left box and our right box to start typing stuff into. We want to add our buttons, which is going to be on a new row. So remember we made a row like this. We can just make another row. I'm going to copy this down here and I'm going to call this buttons, and I'm going to comment out it's like an INI when you put a semicolon. Is that it? Yeah, semicolon. When you put that, it comments it out. And let's put the color equal to color. Let's make it red again. And take a look, make sure it makes our row. So there we go, we got our new row. This is where we're going to put our buttons. So essentially everything about these buttons is going to be identical to the inputs. I want them directly underneath the inputs. I want them to have the same width and all that stuff. So let's pull this down here and make a child, and we'll call this from. So buttons from and buttons to. So we're going to make a new template for the buttons. But remember, we want it to be mostly the same as the inputs. So what we're going to do is make our new button, and we're going to say import, and we're going to import the template of input. So everything from input is going to be copied into here, and we can just we can override the type to button. So even though we put type input here, we're overriding it to be button at this point. So now we want to import that template. So let me just copy and paste it so I don't type it wrong. So that now we have the import button set up. Okay, and maybe I won't call this buttons, I'll call this imports, because when you click it, it imports the colors. That way, because we have another button at the bottom, I don't want to be confused later. So anchor is going to be equal to left, the same as this one, and our text equals use current. And then we'll duplicate this, and we'll have 2. We're going to just copy what we have here for the rights. So it's anchored to the right, position absolute, and use current. So let's save this and check this out, make sure our buttons are showing up. We've got one button on top of the other, and this is a common mistake where you have the same exact name twice. So that will happen. Let me check here. Oh, actually in this case I spelled anchor wrong. There we go. But you'll see that kind of behavior if you have two things with the same name. So notice it just says use. It's not wide enough to say use current, so I'm actually going to delete the current part. And we can probably make the window wider to make the button say use current, but for these purposes we'll leave it as use. And now for the last button we have, which is the button at the bottom that says recolor. And that one is going to be on its own row. So just like this imports was, it's going to be at the same level of the other rows essentially. So let's just copy this guy, paste it down here, and let's add in, instead of imports, we'll say button. Just the main button is fine. Type is equal to button. Anchor is equal to top center, same kind of thing. Now this is not a stretch. This is not a stretch top. It's a top center, so we have to set the width and height. So I want my width to be 100, my height to be 32, and my text equal to recolor. And if we take a look at this one, it's kind of really close to these two guys, and I want to move it down a little bit. So let's say y is equal to 10. We'll move it down 10 pixels there. There we go. Now it's got its little bit of space there. So now we could probably make these boxes instead of 75, maybe 85, because some of the little dots are cut off there. It looks kind of ugly. So let's go up to our template here. Instead of 75, change it to 85. Take a look at that. Cool. That looks a little better. So now we want to set up our events for these buttons to actually work. However, before we go to the events, I want to point out that on our website, if you go to the RetroSketch documentation, over here on the left you'll see plugins and the RetroSketch plugin API and the UI plugin API. And if you go to the UI plugin API, you'll see an example here of what we were just working with, and if you scroll down you'll see all of the input fields, some things that we've messed with here, like stretch, what it is, and I'll fill out these descriptions in a little bit. But you know, if you're making a panel, here's those fields. If you're making a label, here's its fields, and so on and so forth. So all this stuff is on the website if you want a refresher. Okay, sorry about the flashbang there, but let's now set up our events for our buttons. We have the event for closing the main menu, and so now we just need the ones for the buttons, and it's going to be pretty much the same thing. We can even duplicate this line down, but first we need to locate our buttons. So we'll copy this one here. This one will be go button, we'll call it, and then we need our from button and our to button. From BTN and to BTN. Paste that and to. Okay, so now we have our three buttons. We can say our from button here, our to button here, and our go button in the last one. Okay, so the from button, whenever we click it, is going to set the text for our input box. So we have a from hex here, and there should be 3 dots. So we have a text input here that we want to set the text for when we click the button, and we want it to be the color that is currently selected for drawing. So let's go to this from button, and let's get, first of all, let's locate our button first, our input. So local from input. Let's just duplicate that. So we had our from input and to input. There we go, we got those guys. So first thing is we want to get the currently selected color, and we do that with rs canvas color and pass in the app. So this is going to be the color, local, we'll just say C, but this is a number, as you can see here. It's a number, and we don't want a number, we want a hex string, where it's RGBA, 2 bytes each. So we can convert this to a hex string with rs color to hex. And this will give us a string, local s. This is the string, you'll see here, string that we can apply to our input box. So we have a function eng UI input set text, and that set text function will first take in the input that we want to set the text for, and then the second argument is the text we want to assign to it. Okay, I had to fix that warning that I was getting just because it was missing some text there. So we're going to do the same thing to the to button, but we're going to change it. Instead of from, it's going to be to. So we'll say to input. And then the last thing is when we say the go button, we're going to put fancy go code here. And that's going to do the replacement stuff. So let's try and run this, make sure that our buttons work. If I click this, it puts the text in them. So it doesn't work on the second one. Probably because we have the wrong button or something. So let's check that out. Okay, so this is fine, but this is not. This needs to be to, not from, for our to input. Okay. So now this button, that button. Okay, so those work, and this does fancy go code whenever that happens. Now, one of the things you'll notice is if I click anywhere outside of these buttons, say in this area, it'll also close. And we don't really want to close it when we click on that main panel. So a trick that you do is you can set up that main panel to do nothing when you click on it, because there's a stack of events that happen in the UI system, and whatever's closest to the viewer is the event that fires first. If there is no event, it passes through it like there is no event. So let's grab that main panel, which we could just do this right here. That's the one. So we'll call this main panel is that. And we'll set a click event to do nothing. So we'll just put in a function with no body in there as our function. So now when I click in there, it won't close. So if I just accidentally miss, but our background will continue to work. So the last thing we need to do now is set up our code to work, but there is a problem. So if I open up my recolor and I say use these, and I click away and click back in, notice they're blank again. And that's because every time we run this, we are creating a new UI, and we're destroying the old one whenever we close it, which is probably useful in some cases where you just want some UI to launch and do some things, and then be forgotten. It's not important to keep the state around. But in this case, it is important, because let's say that I go in here and I say I want black for the first color, and then I want to pick which color I want for the second one. Well, the black is gone. So that's not very helpful. That means I'd have to type in one of these values. So let's make this a long-lived UI that lives for the entirety of RetroSketch whenever it's first launched. Whenever the plugin is first launched, it will live forever from there. So we'll do this as if you're the developer, and I'm going to give you the name Bob. So you're going to be Bob, and Bob is going to make some tools for RetroSketch. The first thing we want to do when we load in to our script is we want to say, does Bob exist? Because that's going to be our namespace, so to speak. So if not Bob, then we're going to create Bob. Bob equals this. And notice we're not doing a local here, we're doing a global variable so that it lives forever. And this is why you'd want to do your work inside of a namespace, because other people are going to make plugins and you don't want to clobber each other. So it's good to make your own namespace here. And inside Bob, we are going to have let's say you want to make multiple plugins, you don't want to make one plugin. Well, you can have your Bob namespace, and then you can have your plugin name. So this is going to be called recolor, and that's going to be just a field inside of Bob. So now we have our recolor inside of Bob. But that means if we do have two plugins, let's say recolor and other color, this function isn't going to work out so well because Bob is going to exist for the other plugin. So we do want to say if not Bob, or not bob.recolor, which is our field. And that way we can say if not Bob, we're going to create a Bob. And then we're going to say bob.recolor is equal to this. So this is a better way to do it. Now we've created our Bob. And what we want to do also inside of here, whenever we create Bob, is we want to construct UI for Bob. Else, if we already have a Bob and we already have a recolor, we just want to show the window. So we want to say eng UI show, and then the element we want to show. Now, this element is going to be this background here, which we don't have access to, but what we're going to wind up doing is saying Bob recolor, and then this background is going to be a field in recolor. So we're going to show Bob recolor BG, because it will exist at some point. So now we just need this construct UI function. I'm going to make it a local. Try not to make global functions unless you're making a utilities library for people to use. Just use locals whenever you can. So we're going to make a local function, construct UI is equal to a function. There we go. And now that we've created our construct UI function, we essentially want to take everything we've done so far, just all this stuff, and put it inside of construct UI. And let's fix the tab. So now what we want to do is there are some fields we care about keeping forever, and there's some fields we don't care about keeping forever. The fields that we care about keeping forever is that BG, because the BG is the root of all of our UI. It's that black background. So if we hide it, it's going to hide all of its children. If we show it, it's going to show whichever children were visible last time we hit it. So we do want to save the BG here. So we can say bob.recolor.bg is equal to that, rather than just BG by itself. That means we're going to have to go down here to where we used BG and replace it with Bob recolor BG. Or we can set Bob recolor BG at the end, which is something that I like to do. Set up all your fields in one place, and it's going to be equal to BG. So now this is going to be happy. It's not going to complain to us about the background not existing. Now, instead of destroying the UI when we click the background, because we want this UI to live forever, we want to hide the UI. So we're going to say eng UI hide, and we're going to hide BG. Now we can capture BG here, but if we want to be a bit ergonomic about our memory, we already have a global. We don't need to capture BG again for this function scope. So I'm going to hide the Bob color BG. So let's make sure we didn't break anything. Let's open up our recolor, and we're going to say use this color. It's currently blue. And then I'm going to click away and I'm going to choose green and let's go back, recolor. Notice this is still here. And now we have the ability to show and hide. It's not destroying our UI every time, it's just hiding it. So that's exactly what we wanted. And now we can implement the last bit of our code, which is our fancy replace code. And I'm just going to make that a separate function. Local, we'll say recolor, or exec recolor is equal to function. And we're going to pass in two variables. We're going to say from color to color. There we go. So we're going to go from this color, we're going to go to that color. Now what we want to do is we have the colors inside of a hex fields, which are the two input panel, or sorry, the from input and the to input. So we are going to get our colors. We're going to convert those strings into colors, and we can do that with rs hex to color. And we need the string, so let's say local from string is going to be equal to eng ui input text. So this will give us the text from this input, which is going to be from input, and that'll give us the text. And we'll come back to this. Let's just duplicate this line and say to str is going to be to input. So now we pulled those, and we can call our function that we're going to be writing out, exec recolor, exec recolor. And we're going to pass in colors. We're not going to be passing in the hex strings. So we'll take this guy, and we'll pass in from str, and then we'll do rs hex to color to str. Alright, so now we just need to fill in our execute function. I guess that doesn't want to go to it. Okay. So the execute function is pretty straightforward. We want to say we want to get the width and the height of the project, so rs project dimensions, and we'll pass in the app in there to get the project dimensions. And now we want to go through the whole project and look for one color and replace it if we find it. So for x is equal to 1, w1 do, for y is equal to 1, h1 do. We don't have a comma there. And then we want to say if the color is at this position is the color I'm looking for. So if rs pixel color app xy is equal to the from color, because this is the color we're going from, then we're going to replace it with our new color. So rs set pixel app xy and the color, which is to color. Oh, I just had to cut in and edit here. This is post after the video's all been created. What you need to do now to call your function, so this is the function that's going to be changing the colors, as we know. You need to wrap it inside of this rs execute. So you say rs execute app, and then you say it's a function, and this is the function that's going to execute. The reason for this is rs execute will set up history so that when you can undo and redo the set of changes. And you can call this multiple times if you want. Usually you'll just do it once for the whole execution. And if you don't add this, you're going to get a complaint, an error pop up in the window saying that you tried to execute code that changes the document without running it through rs execute. So yep, just make sure to add this. It's not going to be in the rest of the video because the video has already been recorded. I'm just editing this later. So yeah. Let's go back. And with that, we should be pretty much done. Let's check it out. So let's say that our from color is going to be red. Let's paint some red. And then our to color is going to be green. So we've painted some red. Let's paint some other colors just to make sure they're not replacing them. So select red, going to plugins, recolor. I'm going to use the red color. And then I'm going to select green, go back to plugins, recolor, use the green color, and then I'm going to say recolor. Oh, did we hook up this button? So add event to the go button from and to. Oh, right. So remember that this is a long-lived UI. So we have a problem that every time we show this, it's going to show the UI that previously existed, which did not have this button bound. So typically, once you get to this stage when you want to reload the UI, you probably should add some sort of button here for destroying the UI so that you can properly check it later if you're adding code like we're doing right now. So the only way for me to actually get it to come back is I'm going to have to relaunch our RetroSketch instance. Okay, so I've relaunched it, and before I use the plugin, well, first I'm going to draw in some of that stuff I had there. I'm going to replace red with green. So before I unlaunch it, I can add in that button that we were talking about. It doesn't have to look pretty because we're actually going to delete it soon. So we can come up here and we can add this. We can just duplicate our last button here, and we'll just say reset is going to be our name here. We don't need to offset on the Y. We just want to shove it at the bottom to have a way to reset our UI. So let's add in a function in here. I'm going to put some spaces so that I don't, so that I know this is temp. Delete me. Reset. And we're going to add an event here. We can just duplicate this one we had for the reset button, and we're going to call eng UI destroy. And we're going to destroy our specs. And remember, Bob still exists, so we're going to set Bob equal to nil. So we're going to remove Bob so that it actually fully reconstructs. So now when I come up here and I do this, you see that weird reset button there, that's fine. Say we have some values in here and we want to reset the UI, we're going to click on the reset, and now it's reset, and that'll allow us to now add in any extra code that we need. But I think we should be good here. We'll find out. So we have the red selected. Let's go in here. We're going to say from is red. Now let's pick green. 2 is green. Let's say recolor. And there you go. It works. So the only thing that I'd want to do is when I click recolor, I would want this UI to disappear. So let's change from green back to red. Oh, I guess I'm going to reset the UI first because we need to add in functionality here. So we have the show, and we can just copy this engine hide code here and make it as part of we can either make it a part of the construct, or we can make it, at the end here. I think at the end here is better, just so we can call reconstruct somewhere else, or just so we can call execute recolor at multiple times, if we need to in the future. So now I can save that, and we've reset our UI. So we should be good. I have red selected, so I'm going to say use red, and we want to go from green, so recolor, and now our UI has disappeared when we click it, and our pixels have turned red. So I know this is a bit of a long one, but UI is always complicated, and I know it's one of the hardest parts of getting into scripting and plugins inside of software, just because the documentation is so little. So I wanted to kind of give a big head start here on how to do the UI programming, how to debug it, and how to work through it. So now that we have this reset all done, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go in and click it to reset it, then delete the code for the reset, as we don't need it anymore. And now, whoops, our reset button is still there. Oh, I forgot to delete it. Oh boy. Oh, I forgot to delete it from here. Well, it's going to be stuck there now because of what we just mentioned before. But we can relaunch here just to confirm that it looks correct before we go and publish our script. We don't want to publish it for the world to use and it be wrong. So now we can do recolor. Okay, looks good. So let's paint some black and put in some pink there. Go back to black, plugins, recolor, and we want to recolor it to green. Recolor. Nice. So of course this is a silly way to do it. If I want to like click recolor, having this background here maybe is not what you want to click and make it hide the UI. I just wanted to show that because it's a common one to say, hey, focus on this UI stuff. But you could totally make it so that this background doesn't exist, and that allows you to click on colors and click on the UI, and maybe you put this window over here in the corner or something, you know, or just make it a small window up across the top here, and that allows you to interact with the interface and just click the buttons at will. So maybe we'll go over something like that, or modifying this one to look like that in the future. But yeah, that kind of gives us what we need for now to get this going. If you have any questions, please let me know. Have fun. Please give me any suggestions or feedback that you have regarding the scripting. And yeah, happy drawing.